Welcome to Toffee TV. It is a special tonight. I'm joined in the studio by Frank McKenna from Downtown and Business, top man. Joe Thomas, Everton sports correspondent for the Echo. He's ruffled a few feathers lately, but good lad. He's a good lad. He's back here to have a chat with us, and obviously John Blaine in with me as well. I'd say it's been a quiet January, but I'd be lying, so let's not do that. It's been a bit of a mad month. Joe, let's come to you first, because obviously you're still within your first year of covering Everton, and you've had, we've said this before, you've had a bit of a roller coaster ride. It's got a bit more bumpy in the last month or so, and I guess you find there's never a dull moment really covering Everton, is it? There
really isn't a dull moment. There's just never a quiet day at the minute, and it's just. I mean, from one perspective as a reporter, you want there to always be news, but when you're passionate about the good of the club, obviously you want it to be positive, and you want quiet days as well for your own mental health a little bit. I think on the one hand, I'm absolutely delighted that January is over, because I mean that was a horrible month on so many different levels, on the pitch and off the pitch. On the other hand, I'm devastated that it's over, because I'm just looking at the consequences of that and where Everton now are, and I think there are some positives. I think Sean Dyche will probably get more out of the players than perhaps Frank Lampard did at the end of his tenure. But the lack of players, the lack of signings is obviously the big one, and Everton enter this February weaker than they entered the new year, and that's clearly of a concern, and clearly something that's keeping me up at night, and probably yourselves as well, and a lot of other people.
Absolutely. I mean, you've been at the press conference today. Sean Dyche has met the press today for the first time as Everton manager. How did you find him?
Yeah, I thought he was very good. I mean, he's very confident, very assertive. He knows the terrain.
Is he as scary in real life as he looks? You see him?
He's one of those ones where it's difficult to judge. He is quite jovial. He's very engaging and compelling. And he's happy to have a joke as well. We've had the first glimpse of the lookalike game off the camera as well. So he is quite compelling in that respect, and quite nice. So that's good. But there is also that kind of, with some of the questions and some of that, he's more than happy to stand his own. He's more than happy to, dismiss a line of questioning if he doesn't think that it's something that he wants to go down, or if you think the reporter's got the wrong end of the stick. So I think we're in for some interesting times, but he's definitely assertive. He knows the terrain, because obviously he's been a Premier League manager for the best part of a decade. But having said that, I'm sure there's a little bit of nerves for him as well, because it isn't all completely, territory that he's been down before, because Everton is a much different kettle of fish to Burnley. With all due respect to Burnley, Everton is massive. The scrutiny will be so much higher. And you look at some of the press conferences that he was probably having on a Friday before a game at Burnley. It's kind of, not me, but my colleagues in the press, probably a little bit of a different calibre going into some of this, because, as I say, the attention on Everton is just so much at the moment. It is so much at the best of times, the worst of times, but at the minute, it really is the eyes of the footballing world, the eyes of the Premier League are on Everton, and he's going to have to deal with that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, Frank, obviously Sean Dyche has replaced Frank Lampard, namesake there. I mean, what do you think he can bring to Everton? Because he is a different character to Frank Lampard, isn't he? Or certainly appears to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, listen, last time I was was saying give Frank Lampard time. It was the Wolves game hadn't yet been played. And I honestly thought that Frank Lampard would have turned it round for us. We had Wolves, Brighton, Southampton, and you were looking at those fixtures thinking that's potentially 7 points. And then, of course, we've gone and got a point at City and lost the 3 home games. So I don't think anybody, even those of us who would have liked to have seen Frank Lampard here till the end of the season, could have really defended his position at that point after the West Ham game. Arguably we should have got rid of him a little bit before. So how bizarre. We've criticised Moshiri in the past for being too quick with the "you're fired," and now we're saying, well, he's probably hung on a little bit too long for Lampard. In the end, I think if you look at the situation we're in, which is dire, it's desperate. I think we're all anxious about the position in the league. Dyche, I think, was the best man for the job at this moment in time. But then you go back to the 999-point plan. Where does it fit into that? You go back to the strategy. Where does it fit into that? Is Sean Dyche in as the firefighter, which I suggest he is, to be fair? Or are they actually now saying, well, it's not Hollywood managers, it's not young up-and-coming coaches, it's somebody with experience who can give Everton that sort of horrible identity again, a little bit like we had under Moyes. Even though towards the end I think Moyes was always a little bit underestimated in terms of where he eventually took that team, because I thought we played good football the last couple of seasons under Moyes. So are they saying now, okay, Dyche's going to be there for the foreseeable until we get into the new stadium and then perhaps kick on, or are we actually going back to being a bit more pragmatic in terms of our approach? So I'm quite pleased with the appointment. I do wonder whether it's come too late, and I'm looking at the fixtures and I'm thinking, have this squad of players got 25 points in them? Because I think, or even 20 actually, because I think 35 will probably keep you up this season. Have we got those points, those wins, those draws in us? Can Dyche come in and organise the team, make us difficult to beat, and pinch a few 1-0s? And that's what we're all hoping for.
I think at one point, obviously, Joe's alluded to it there, just away from the actual football. Obviously, people aren't happy, and rightly so, with the way the club is. No, with the way the club has been run, really. When you look at where Everton are, Joe done his headline after the Crystal Palace game, never again and all that. And here we are, front page and everything. And here we are a few months later in the same position. It was in a worse position. Let's have it right. So nothing's really moved on. People are really frustrated, and we've got a campaign, the NS Now campaign, a protest again at the weekend, albeit a peaceful protest that's out there. Peaceful protest. Let's keep the message. But before the Southampton game, the club obviously came out with a statement, and that seemed to just inflame everything and has angered people. And then the PR since then hasn't been great. Now you're a businessman who advises businesses on lots of things, but PR is one of them. I mean, how do you think the club has handled it from a PR perspective since the Southampton game? Because I understand if there was threats, I understand people going on, I'm not really comfortable about going to this game if I'm getting threats. No issue with that. And I think if the club would have relayed that in a manner, I think most people would have gone, I get why they don't want to be there, but it seems like the club it's almost been own goal after own goal since. Do you read it like that, or have you got a different perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what had happened to Liz Truss's advisors. To be honest, I hadn't appreciated they turned up at Goodison Park. Listen, it's not been good, and you know that I have a good, positive relationship with many people who work for the club. I would never doubt any of the commitment of any of the individuals who work there, but even they will be reflecting on the last 4 weeks or so, and I would suggest saying we've got some of this badly wrong. And that needs to be looked at honestly. There needs to be a re-engagement with the fan base. How they do that, I don't know. I'm afraid it's not the owner doing an interview with whoever that guy is. It's not the owner, full stop. I mean, whatever Farhad Moshiri is good at, and he's clearly good at something because he's got far more money than I'll ever see, he's not a good communicator. He doesn't understand the fan base. Arguably, he's not great at football, full stop. So I think we've got to find a way as a club of reconnecting the hierarchy, the people who are running the club, with the fan base. I think Dyche actually will help with that, because towards the end, Frank looked a broken man, didn't he? I saw that video clip at West Ham, and he wasn't coming across as positive and the same sort of buoyant character that he was early on in his Everton career. So I think there's a massive job in terms of the communication side of things, and Everton needs to start to get that right. I think from the supporters' perspective, though, and this frustrates me as well, what's the strategy for the supporters at this moment in time? And so we want Moshiri to sell the club, right? I'm with that. I think it's been a disastrous 6 or 7 years.
Absolutely.
But then you've got to look at the environment we're in. So we've got a club at the moment that we don't know if it's going to be in the Premier League or the Championship. So that's a barrier to sale. You've got the Premier League going through a massive review at the moment where they're talking about bringing additional regulatory powers and an independent regulator into the Premier League setup. Yeah. So if you're an investor, you may be looking at that and thinking, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And then, on top of all that, you've got potentially a breakaway Super League. So what product am I buying? Yeah. And even if I'm interested in Everton, am I going to do it now? And the answer is no. And so the other question then becomes, you know, we're saying to Moshiri, sack the board. So you're saying to this guy who's appointed 7 managers, all of whom have failed to a lesser degree. Ancelotti, maybe you could say, but he wasn't pulling up any trees. We want him to sack a board, and then we're trusting him to reappoint a better board. And so what I'm saying to Evertonians is, I get the strategy, I get where we want to go with this, but the tactics, I think we're going to have to rethink, because there's no investors out there at this moment in time wanting to invest in Everton, or probably many Premier League clubs. And if you're looking for a new board, do we really trust Farhad Moshiri to come up with something better than we've got now?
What people would say to that, though, I get it, I hear all the points, good points, what people would say to that is 2 things, I think. One, the MSP, the American investment company, are looking to invest, apparently. Farhad Moshiri has kind of said that as well, it's out there, so that might be one kind of in. But the other thing is, again, fair enough, what we understand about Moshiri selling the club or whatever, mightn't be the best time. He continues to stay, it's not for sale. Investment, yes, it's not for sale, we don't know. So, I mean, like you've just said, do we trust that that's right or wrong? I don't know. But I think what a lot of fans would say is, but we do need to change, the club, the board. Then if we're not going to, if the owner, and it's up to him, is I'm not going to sell now for all of those reasons, I want more money, I'm not getting it at the moment, whatever. What happens with that board? We cannot, I think it's gone too far anyway. By the PR stuff has been a disaster, and I think that's kind of ended their tenure. I don't see any way back for them, and that's being the nicest thing. What we've said on this channel for a long time, John, has been key in this as well, and I think I said this to you when we were last in, if they're not going to just like get rid of the board, strengthen it, then make it bigger. Yeah. But I almost feel like it's past that point as well. So how would we get round that then? You know, if I was leading the campaign against it, what would you say to me then? If you're saying, are we trusting the owner? But and I get the be careful what you wish for, and sometimes how do we know who's coming in is better than what's going out? But I think what's there right now is a too big a distraction for too many people, because of that years of we haven't done very well and they've been the incumbents of it. So what would you say to people who are asking that then?
Well, there's 2 points there, isn't there? I think there's the recent past, which has been a disaster, and we've touched on that in terms of PR and communications and the review. And then there's what went on before. And again, you know, Bill Kenwright's come in for a lot of criticism recently for selling to Moshiri. And it's like, there must have been better people who wanted to invest in Everton than that. Well, I doubt if there was, to be fair, but okay. Then you've got to remember where we were then and where Farhad Moshiri was then. So he had a mate called Usmanov. And I would say today that had Usmanov still been a stakeholder, a sponsor, an associate of our owner, we would not be in the position that we're in today. We wouldn't be in the difficulties with FFP. We wouldn't have a situation where commercially we're struggling as much as we are. I'm not suggesting we'd be qualifying for the Champions League, but I think we'd be in a better place. So when Bill Kenwright sold the club, he sold it in the full knowledge, I'm sure, that there was a bit of a sugar daddy as a safety net there. Well, so we've got to remember that. You know, it's easy to forget the history of that sale and how that came about. You can argue till the cows come home, were the side deals about Bill staying on as chairman and so on and so forth. Nothing to do with us in a sense, because again, it's Moshiri's money. If he trusts Bill Kenwright to be the chair, that's fine. When we talk about a new board, my concern about that comes back to, does Farhad Moshiri know enough about football to undertake that restructure and that radical change that you require. If you were to say to me, well, there's going to be a football consultant who comes in and starts to look at the way but I thought that had happened with the review.
Frank, this football club is so dysfunctional, right? Both on and off the field. We've heard an articulate manager today basically thinking out loud what his strategic approach in short term is, which is going back to the basics, working hard, blah, blah, blah. In business terms, I mean, you talk about commercial, believing you just keep going to the sugar daddy and asking for more money, right? If you're a parent, your kids come to you, what have you done with the money I give you before? I'm going to step mate, right? And we've been commercially poor for a long, long time. Certainly pre-Mashiri and pre-Usmanov, of course, by implication, right? But I do agree with you. If the sanctions hadn't happened because of war, never all if buts, then he would be a publicly recognised shareholder, Usmanov. He would have been that minority shareholder, right? He would have been the investor. And that would have plugged a gap. I think the thing that's most damning is that the owner has not seen, for his own reasons, to make the board better. And certainly, if there's any such thing for an independent media channel on YouTube to have editorial, then the editorial was, it's not about getting rid of who's there, it's about making the board better. That's the what. The how is something else. And I think the same applies now. The what is, we want a better Everton. What's the how? In the absence of an opinion from the football club, the fans have decided the how is get rid of the board. Well, that might not be the best how, right? But you can't have a silence, a void, going on.
There's no way back for them now.
No. I don't think so either.
And listen, I'm not here tonight to be an apologist.
No, you're not.
No.
I'm looking at the whole picture. I'm looking at, the number of times we've all called for managers to be sacked. We were saying off air about we actually potentially should have stuck with Marco Silva if you look what he's doing at Fulham. So, I'm not here to say the board have done a great job. They're fantastic. We couldn't do any better. But what I am saying, John, first of all, in terms of the sugar daddy point, Manchester City, Newcastle United, sugar daddies. You talk about commercial nous. You talk to those over the par and their fan base. They think they're crap at commercials. Manchester United, Gary Neville will tell you they're crap at commercials. So football as a business isn't blessed with examples of great clubs with brilliant commercials.
I think the strategy City Group, I think, might be
that'd be fantastic. But, Manchester City, I think, is the exception that proves the rule. And again, by the way, in terms of Evertonians, we're great, aren't we? We signed a lad in the summer. People were criticising because he didn't wear a rainbow armband at a game. And now we're saying, let's get Qatari money in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, come on, and this is where the inconsistencies of the fan base come in. But for me, John, the concern I have, I'll repeat, with a new board coming in, right, and I've cards on the table, I get on with Denise, don't know Bill Kenwright, get on with some of the people who work at an executive level at Everton. But if I was convinced that they could be replaced by Farhad Mashiri with better people, I'd be right behind that movement. I am not convinced. I do not trust the owner of our club to get those big decisions right.
Do you see him as the bigger problem than the board, Frank?
For sure. Listen, you go to recruitment of players.
Yeah.
I don't think Benitez or Lampard wanted that kid we got from Villa on loan.
Yeah,
didn't that come from an agent?
Yeah.
I don't think Bill Kenwright signed in.
No, it was
right. You go further back, and there's other players that have come into the club. Now, rumours, but people have said, manager didn't fancy him. Who's doing the player recruitment? Manager recruitment, we know the owner has had a say. I suspect that Benitez was not on the long list of Bill Kenwright, but we ended up with him.
He wasn't on Brand's long list.
I know for a fact that Sam Allardyce wasn't the first choice. So, and then we're saying, well, this guy who appointed Benitez and appointed Sam Allardyce, what we want him to do next is appoint a board. And I'm saying to our fans exactly the phrase that you use, be careful what you wish for. Because you may end up with a board who say, do you know what, the best thing here, Farhad, fire sale. Right, let's go down into the Championship. Let's take the parachute payment. Let's try and finish the stadium. But if we can't, let's just get out with something.
Why do you say, Frank, that you do acquiesce to what the largest shareholder wants? Because I'm talking about making the board stronger, bringing more experience to it, bringing more competence, bringing more bandwidth. The board itself can do that.
And I think,
and it should have,
that there is an argument, and you may be right here, in terms of the disconnect has become so wide now that it's impossible to have a constructive conversation. What I would have preferred is that, listen guys, we know you all love Everton, we know you work hard, we know that you turn up on a Saturday wanting us to win, but you need help. And that maybe would have been a conversation where we could have made some progress. Whether we're past that now, your point is we are, then obviously my point would be, I would hope that we can reset and we can start to have that conversation. We also say, and additional members of the board with some commercial expertise, people who potentially can go out and help get that investment. Absolutely.
Well, that was what I mean. That was going to be the point. I think certainly. I can speak for all Evertonians. I'm just saying what the people we speak to.
Speak for the majority.
Well, I don't know. I think if people are aligned,
majority share the opinions.
I was going to say, it's still my opinion. I just think now I've never seen the fan base so united in agreement of what should happen.
But it's a very narrow objective.
Whether that's 60% want to change the button, 40 don't. What I mean is the people who are talking about it now, and I think I think 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, whatever it was, that I think. You might have been right there, and John spoke about it as well. Let's make it bigger, get people in. Ultimately that drops out where Bill Kennan, like, in my opinion, at 77 with not great health, should step aside, become life, do whatever, but we need something fresh. Whether Denise, I don't know Denise Barrett Baxendale, I don't know whether she's good, bad, indifferent at a job. Put other people on, make that board bigger. I personally now think the way they've handled this, and this was the bit about the PR, I think it's too far now for people. I don't see a way how they're able to come back. As far as Farhad Moshiri, can he repair that, what's gone on? Easy wins for him. I'm not denying he isn't the issue. I think a lot of people would say he massively is the issue. He is the issue. I think easy wins for him now is change the chairman, change the CEO. Certainly change the chairman. I think if he changed the chairman, I think a lot of people go, all right, what else is he doing? And let's see what else he's doing. It might bring people back closer. I think if he changed the two, it would massively. I don't think Graham Sharp and Grant Ingles I don't honestly. I keep saying I'm amazed Grant Ingles had his flag. Someone had a flag with Ingles out. I don't know.
It was Ingles.
It might have been him going, I'll have my name on it. It might have been him. But I do believe that would be a way for Farhad to cool everything down. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. I just think personally, from a PR point, it's gone too far now. They keep putting statements out that just made it worse. It just got people's back up. But I think that's where we are. Talking about the investment going in, that MSP, we won't know, will we? We won't know till it's signed off. But they have got experience in being within sport and clubs, within wanting an influence in the boardroom, within practices of getting commercial growth, buying the X Games, things I'm involved in, basketball clubs and football. So they've got a history in sports which I think Everton is lacking. That board would be lacking. That might be a way for Farhad Moshiri to strengthen that board. But I do believe from just my view, looking at it and people we speak to, a couple of people are gonna have to be taken off the board. I do.
It has got to the point, hasn't it? In a normal business environment, there'd have to be the sacrificial. Someone at the top table has to go.
Yeah, if I can use the political analogy again, how many went before Boris went? Fair few actually. But I think the point I'd make in terms of the investors, I'll come back to the original point I made really, which is I think there are tire kickers, and most of them are Americans. And that's right throughout the Premier League. But investors are astute people. They've not got cash for nothing. And as I say, I think there's a precarious situation around the Premier League and its future at the moment in terms of its governance. And if I was an investor, foreign investor, I've got no loyalty to Everton or anybody else.
Of course,
I'm looking at that as a risky investment in a global economy that's not at its best at the moment. As I say, we may be in the Championship. Hopefully we're not, but that's another factor that they'll be putting in. Mashiri will be looking at it at the moment thinking, I'm not going to get as big a bang for my buck. I want us to get to the end of the season and see if we can stay up. And then, you know, the other thing an investor's got to look at it, who am I negotiating with? So am I negotiating with a single owner, or am I negotiating with an owner who has stakeholders? And how do I really get to a deal that I can trust? And the most precious commodity for these guys, by the way, is time. So these deals aren't done within a week, 2 weeks, a month. John is better at advising you than I am on that, but it's months. And you don't want to spend 8, 9, 10 months talking to a guy who then at the 11th hour says to you, well, actually, I've just got to run past so-and-so. And I think that's another issue. And we as supporters who've got an absolute emotional investment in this, we want people to come in and buy the club who've got zero emotional investment in Everton. We want people to give us their money, buy better players, improve the club's performance. There are no guarantees any of that's going to happen. And at this moment in time, my gut instinct tells me those investors are not banging the door down at Goodison Park.
Sorry, the context there for you, I think, is about investors who want control and are prepared to put their own money into the business, right? MSP Sports Capital, venture capitalist, ruthless, can see an opportunity to make a buck. Here's an underperforming business, and it will be a disruptive change. What Farhad, I think, sees in either them or someone like them is expertise, sitting at the board level, it's all justified, they're shareholders and so on. But turnarounds, because that's what we're looking at, do not happen overnight. You know, when I was doing big deals, the actual, you do all your prep, which perhaps hasn't finished yet, and then the deal making bit of it, 6 to 9 months. You know? So we'll be well into a championship season by then, you know, potentially. The other side of that, of course, is if it gets done quicker, right, it's because either someone's got a real good handle on risk, right, or they've got the seller by the short and curlies. And then you do get into, be careful what you wish for, because the opportunist will get it then. The man who can close the deal quickly and suddenly finds himself, or she, right, sitting on 25% of a Premier League football club, haven't paid a huge amount of money of it. They know it's got physical assets that can be got rid of, i.e. players, to almost get that money back. And real ruthless businessmen may conclude the best thing, lads, is to go down into the Championship, right? Reset financial fair play, get rid of all these high earners, start from the ground up, right? And off you go. Now, that's a turnaround we're expecting to happen then in a year. That's really demanding. Can be done. Can be done. Now, in my experience, because you call it out, that's like going from crap to great, isn't it? Right? But you can improve and get better. I'll just do this for effect, Joe, right? Almost overnight. And you do that by changing perceptions. And you change perceptions through leadership skills. And there aren't any. Right? So the board has to change. It's not optional. Survival isn't optional. The board has to change. Now, what distresses me, and actually is perhaps the major criticism of the board, is it wants somebody else to help it. But it doesn't, right? You probably offered to help. I know I did, and so on.
I've never offered to help.
Well, okay. You know, I'm just this little guy in the corner.
You should be.
I'm just this little guy in the corner, right? But for me, outside looking in, it's so much needs help. I could help, right? And then when you exhaust my ability to help, you get somebody else, and so on.
But again,
rather than just waiting for the owner to either take everyone out and throw a new team in.
But John, then you've got to ask yourself
crazy,
where the hierarchy and decision maker of the club and the organisation lies. And then I come back to the owner. So the communication strategy is set by the owner. The leadership and the culture of the club is set by the owner. And again,
we're not going to miss the board, then, are we?
If you think he's, but then you may as well just put. If you're saying to me that he's going to bring a board of people who are going to challenge him, who are going to change the culture and the nature of Everton Football Club at the moment, I'm saying, I doubt he will. So do I then say, well, in terms of those board members, limited though they may be, do I think that Bill Kenwright is an Evertonian with the best interests of the club at heart, even if he's not getting it right?
He is, absolutely.
Yeah? Do I think Sharpie is? Do I think Denise is? Do I think, I don't know, the other guys, right? Am I confident that Farhad Moshiri will bring in a new board who've got that same commitment, that same emotional attachment to Everton Football Club? Because I think Moshiri's biggest problem is that he's not got an instinct for football. He's not got an instinct for Everton. So you look at some of the communications that he's had with Jim White. Remember all those bloody farcical things that he did? And even the one he did with the guy last week. And you've got your head in your hands. Now, are you saying to me that Everton Football Club's communication directorate said to Farhad, great idea if you go and do an interview with him and say we're going to sign a striker? Because I don't believe you.
Everton.
I'm going to say no. I want to bring Joe in.
Everton filmed it.
I want to bring Joe in. Joe, obviously, we've talked about the PR stuff, and obviously from a journalist perspective, at times you must have been thinking, don't think this is a great idea. But since I understate that, don't I? Absolutely. I'm not going to hang you up with that. It's pathetic, the PR side. But how much more difficult do you think everything that played out on top of those statements made January a more difficult window for Everton? Because we're seeing people direct it back. Everton ended the window with no players simply because of the fans. Do you buy that?
I certainly don't buy into that. I think that Everton ended the January transfer window without fans because of dysfunction within the club, not because of the support of the Everton's fan base. And I wanted to make this absolutely clear: is a draw to the club. It's one of the best things about it. It's one of the things that should be. It's one of the things that should be trumping, players getting them into the club as opposed to them going elsewhere. They should see the scenes that they saw back end of last season, and albeit we don't want to see a relegation battle, we want to see those. They should be seeing that. They should be thinking, imagine if they had good times at Everton, imagine if they had success and I'd have that, and if I was responsible, if I was part of that. Everton fans are one of the best things about the club at the moment. January was an unmitigated disaster, and it was an unmitigated disaster on a number of levels. Results, obviously, and that accounted for Frank, transfer window, and you say from PR, from an optics point of view as well. I think we talk about communication. I think one of the issues that we've seen over the past month is it's been so stark that there is a very big difference between communication and dialogue. There's one thing where you are speaking at people, and that's what it feels like open letters are. That's what it feels like the press releases are, statements, etc. So much of what has been done been effectively done from the confines and the comfort of within the club. They've decided on something and then they've put it out there.
Push communications.
And then I think that's part of a problem, because what you're not doing is you're not exposing yourself to external scrutiny. Would it be comfortable if someone sat down with someone from the board sat down with me and I asked questions on behalf of the fans? Probably not. And I'm not saying there aren't other people that wouldn't do it better, because there are. But I just think that so much of this could have been nipped in the bud with a little bit more openness and a little bit more transparency in earlier stage, because so much of the communication that we have had has backfired. We started the month with Denise Barrett-Baxendale writing in the programme about triumphing the strategic review. Well, we've ended the month with Sean Dyche coming in. His first words, and this is to club channels, not to the press, his first words is that I want to remodel the club. I mean, there's a disconnect. In the middle of the month, at the start of the month, we've had Frank Lampard saying to people like myself, there is a little bit of money. It's not going to be easy, but there's a little bit of money to buy players. Everybody knows what we need. We need forwards. We're going to get 2 of them. We're going to try and get 2 of them. Okay, well, 2 weeks into the transfer window, there's none. So Farhad Moshiri sits down with the fan advisory board, and I think that was a good thing. I think that was genuine engagement with supporters, and I think more of that would be good.
But should that, the actual interview, this is something that, because obviously I've got an opinion on watching the interview, right? But if me and you were doing an interview and I say to you, Joe, I've got questions to ask you. So I go, number one, Joe, you've been journalist at Everton, and you go, yes, I've been a journalist for Everton since April. And Joe, the first question, would it not have been better, and this isn't a criticism of Jazz Bal, there isn't a criticism of Jazz. I actually feel like it was, again, this is Everton doing this. Would it not have been better for Jazz to ask Farhad Moshiri a question, and when Farhad Moshiri answers the question, for Jazz to be able to respond to it, so it is actually an interview? Because I'm sure if you sat down opposite Farhad Moshiri or Denise Barrett-Baxendale, Sean Dyche, and they say, you ask them a question and they respond, I'm sure if there's something that you want a little bit more from, you don't just go, I'll answer that. You know, you'd go, can I just ask you about that then? You know, and Farhad Moshiri saying things like, you know, we're going to get a centre forward. You know, is that a guarantee? Because Evertonians are nervous, or do you think there'll be more than that? Or, I don't know, just off the top of me, you know, we've the board are doing a good job. Well, what do you say then to people who say they're not doing a good job? Or people who ask the question of why the board hasn't made bigger, or why there's no commercial director on it, or there's no chief engagement officer on it, or, you know, them kind of things where you give me an answer and I go, Joe, that's great, but there's one bit you said and I want to revisit that, because it was just literally, it was why everyone said Jazz wasn't in the same room as him.
It was edited to look like
it was edited to look that way. Crazy. Would it not be a better interview if someone doesn't, you know, if someone doesn't challenge one of your answers?
I mean, I think Jazz was there first and foremost.
No, he was definitely there.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he was there.
And I think that was a step. I think that interview was a step forward on everything else that has happened. I think it was, in a very bad month, I think that was the best of what we saw.
God, I also that must have been a bad month.
Well, we know it was I think that the fan advisory board should be applauded for at least trying, because that's, as it seems to have been the case, that was the only external access that was granted by the club to anybody of any significance at Everton, and at least we got that, and the fan advisory board obviously fought for that. Is that a
worry though?
Oh, but that's a worry, of course it is. The other thing I'd also say is, obviously we know it was heavily edited, so we don't know that Jazz didn't ask back at certain times. I think one of the things that was unfortunate, and again this probably, you know, feeds into the narrative of missed opportunity from that month, is obviously that video was filmed on the Thursday before the West Ham game and put out after the Tuesday.
When Danjuma had gone.
When, you know, well, not only the Danjuma deal fallen through, but Frank Lampard had gone. So my guess is that some of the editing is to kind of cut out. There are probably times when Jazz has gone, and what about this and what about this? And the answer has been going into details that have then become irrelevant by the time the video has been put out. So
you're giving a lot of credit there. I'm not convinced.
Only because Toffee should have taken it. He didn't.
Well, perhaps. But anyway, just going back to the point I was making. Again, the difference between what was said and what was done.
Absolutely.
You have people at the beginning of the month saying that they know the issues are going to bring in players. That's reinforced then by Farhad Moshiri in the middle of the month coming out and saying, well, we're going to get a striker. And again, at the end of the month, there is no striker.
Can you believe, from a journalist perspective, but even taking your journalist hat on, just like someone who's just watching football, you see Everton are the only team in the Premier League to not strengthen the squad when we've all said, we were talking about Frank was in before Christmas, I think it was, we're talking about, we'll definitely get 2 or 3 in the window, we've got to, we're in such a dire position. It wasn't like we were 8th or 9th and we're going, if we get one in we can finish in Europe. We're in a mess. Can you believe that has actually passed?
11 o'clock on Tuesday, I just tweeted astonishing. That was the only thing.
I saw
I was just there, and I firmly woke up on Tuesday morning expecting that I would go to bed with 2 or 3 signings in the bag, because I thought I just didn't see an alternative. Even no matter what we say about how poorly the club is run, I thought even if it's a shambles, they would stiuld come up with something. And I think that's obviously a real concern. And just going back to communication strategy, it was a terrible month on that front. And I think that the problem is we've ended up in this situation now where we're at such extremes in the relationship between the board and the fans. And I think the thing that worries me most about January is the fact that it didn't have to be that way.
No.
There were so many missed opportunities just to kind of ease the nerves of the fans. There were opportunities to be proactive that were missed. I can understand why Everton didn't have a sign on the 1st of January. Okay. You know, I know they had 6 weeks of the World Cup break and things like that, but even at that point, you know, players coming back to squads from the World Cup, there was always going to make things a lot harder. There's always going to be an assessment that was taking place within squads and within, you know, dressing rooms at the back end of December. Who's injured, who's not, who's now wanted by other clubs, and how's that going to affect us? You know, at the end of the day, you needed, and you look at the clubs that did do deals at the very beginning of January, you needed money, or you needed a pull. Everton don't have it in a minute. Liverpool and Chelsea had players, well, they've got a lot of money, they've got European football, you know, that is what it is. Wolves did, but you know, if I'm honest, I know that Matheus Cunha was on Everton's radar going into January, but I didn't at the time, and I still don't see that as a good deal. He might keep Wolves up, and if he does, fair play to him. But committing to spending an eventual £45 million on a player that struggled to score in La Liga, that stinks to me as the type of club, the type of deal, the type of risky gamble that's got Everton in the situation that they are now. Yeah. But to have not had someone lined up by the 10th of January, that's where, you know, even if it's just, you know, obviously you can't waste millions, you can't do that, but just to not have the foresight, just to think, you know what, if they do have a bad start, then at least we'll have that in, we'll have a signing just to grow a little bit of momentum, just to show that we're being proactive, we can see the issues and we're trying to address them. Obviously, you have the Brighton game, and I think that after that, really, I think that was the end of Frank Lampard. Yeah, it was. I think that was, you know, I'm disappointed. I liked Frank. I liked dealing with him as a person, and I think that he had the potential to take Everton further forward than he eventually did. But it was a stay of execution after that. You know, it was 2.5 weeks that it only really felt like it was going one way. And the problem with that was that's 2.5 weeks that you eat up into the transfer window, 2.5 weeks in which the negative momentum continues, the negative results continue as a result. You know, you've lost a couple more games by that point. You know, you've made the situation even harder.
Against two teams.
You know, the timing of that decision is so frustrating. You know, they've left it long enough for him to be able to tempt Danjuma to come to the club, but got rid of him so early that the deal's not yet done.
Deal fell.
You know, it really is frustrating. So I mean, you know, I think so much of this month and the problems that have had, and you know, I mean, we all make the point. There are a lot of very good people at Everton Football Club, and I think the vast majority, if not all of them, want the best for Everton Football Club. I don't dispute that.
No.
Obviously, some frustrating decisions have been made, and the problem is at the end of the month, we're looking back, and it's very difficult to see what the strategy was. It's very difficult to take any kind of, you know, Evertonians are probably at the lowest point they've been in some time now, and they're there with good reason. You know, I think Sean Dyche is a good appointment. I think that's a decision that the club got right this month. You know, whenever it made it, you know, whether it made it too late, it's you know, it's a matter for opinion. But I think that's a decision they got right. Yeah. But they go into February weaker than they went into January. They've missed the last opportunity that they had to take matters into their own hands. Yeah. You know, now it's a case of, you know, going to the rest of the season, it's going to be luck. It's can they ride it out? Can they build momentum? Can Dyche get a tune out of these players? Can they avoid injuries to the very few players that is? And you know, there are so many opportunities for Everton fans to be reassured, and they've all been missed. And that doesn't exactly fill you with much confidence, and it's a real shame.
That basically just sums your tweet up, doesn't it? Astonishing, because that's how it feels. John, you often, you know, you full of your catchphrases, you know, plan the dive the plan, all of that. But you do say, you know...
You say the answers are long enough to talk.
You know, well, exactly, yeah. But
Need shorthand, don't
you talk about, you know, projects going late one day at a time and all that. With regard to everything Frank said, everything Joe said, my perspective that the gap between fans and the is for me, is irreparable now. Yeah. Do you see it quite that way, or do you still think there's a way to fix this? Might be over-egging it, but a way to start.
Everything can be fixed, it's just how long it takes, right? I do think what it needs is disruptive change, because I think everything you just summarised there was on the back of being told we have a plan, that the director of football has a plan, they're all big fat plans, but the execution...
120 points.
The execution hasn't been good, so we need disruptive change. You need more energy at the decision-making level. When we spoke here, Frank, you may have not seen it, but talking about, for me anyway, and I'd be interested in what you think, distilling down what's wrong is we're not able to make decisions quickly enough. And that's almost like great sympathy, say, for Denise, who perhaps might want to do something. So she runs it past Bill runs it past Farhad's somewhere else, takes 3 days for the answer to come, and before you know it, you know, imagine trying to do that on deadline day.
Well, it's impossible, isn't it? And it's,
so you haven't empowered them.
It kills business.
Of course it does.
That's what kills business.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got to have people in there who are empowered to make decisions quickly. Yeah. I mean, I'll go back to the communication point. There seems to be a view that was a positive interview. I thought absolutely the opposite. Yeah, I don't like owners doing interviews. I think you've got Graham Sharp on the board. Why? If it's not for that. If there's not somebody who can connect with the supporters, their own language, he understands the club, he could have gone on and said, well, from a football perspective, because listen, we're not interested in, really. I don't want to know about the balance sheet of Everton. I want to know we've got 11 players on there who've got a chance of winning a game. And Sharpie was the guy, I think, and if failing that, Kevin Thelwell. Yeah. The director of football. I don't want to know from the owner because, as I said before, I don't think he knows very much about football. Yeah. So I don't want to be interviewed by the fan group. Yeah. I want to see somebody up there who can talk to me as an Evertonian about the football side
Kevin
of the club.
He's done one interview.
And going back to this strategy and the, I said earlier, jokingly, the 999 point. In my business, every single year, we do an action plan for the next 12 months. Yeah. It's never any more than 5 points.
Absolutely.
There's 5 objectives, and if 4 of them, we've done well. If I do 5, great.
Strategic objectives.
But 100 and odd, where do you start with that? And that's, that goes back to a club that does appear to be dysfunctional from the outside looking in. They may have, well, there's 126 points, but actually they're the 5. Again, as Joe said earlier, communicate that. Say, okay, that's the plan, but that's like a 10-year plan. And so what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the academy, where apparently lots of good things are happening. We're going to focus on, not the pictures, though, of celebration of relegation avoidance. Again, what does that say about the culture of our club? So, from my perspective, I thought the interview with the owner, and this sounds as though I've got a gripe against Farhad Bashiri again. Never met the guy. I'm delighted that he's secured a stadium. I'm delighted at the money that he's put into the club. But owners need to know the place. And the place isn't front and centre of interviews with TalkSport and fan groups.
So whose job is it to tell him that?
Well, I think he's been told.
Oh,
I just don't think he listens.
Okay.
I think there's people at the club who've had that. I don't know. But
I know they've done it.
I think, and ultimately, it's like anything else, John. Listen, people come into me sometimes in my business and say you've got it wrong. I can take that advice or I don't. If I don't, very seldom are they going to say, well, I'm walking out on my 50 grand a year job. Yeah. And these people are paid a lot more than my staff.
That's right.
So it's, in the end, you can offer the advice. If it's not taken, then that's unfortunate. If you're saying to me, well, if he doesn't take your advice, you should just walk out. Well, yeah, in the panacea. But listen, these guys, first of all, they love the club. Secondly, they'll all think we're better inside the tent than we will be outside because we can do a bit of good. I might not be able to do everything I want, but I can do a bit of good. And at this moment in time, again, I know what you're saying, Joe, in terms of the fan base being a draw for players, and I think that's absolutely correct in the past. But there is a toxicity, isn't there, around Everton at the moment. And it comes down to what you said, that disconnect between the board and the fans. And then you're seeing those scenes of players getting stopped in the street by fans who, by the way, I think are absolute dickheads, right? I don't think that's an attractive proposition at the moment. I don't think Everton Football Club in January, given all the drama that was going on, and there's blame to be apportioned right across the board, and the fans will be at the bottom of that pyramid, by the way. Yeah. But nonetheless, we as a club either come together, and if we don't, I think we're down. And it's entirely up to us. And that's not, sorry mate, that's not saying we have to turn up with banners on a Saturday with, isn't our board fantastic? And it's not even a case of saying you don't protest, but there's ways of protesting. I was delighted with your opening comments. It's not threatening people. Nope. It's not charging players down in the street and stopping them getting home, particularly when they've got the kids in the back of the car, by the way. Right. And it's not sort of vitriolic things, like some of the stuff on social, Ken Wright didn't go to the game today. I've heard he's ill. I hope it's nothing trivial. I don't want to associate myself with stuff like that.
I think what I will say,
there's a line, isn't there?
What I will say, Fran, and let's, that is correct, and I think most people who are level-headed people would agree. But what I do have to say as well, though, is that the scenes around the cars were a joke. It was embarrassing, but they were kids, angry kids, right? Yeah. Most people protested perfectly well in the ground. They supported the team until the final whistle, and then because the team hadn't left everything, and I do have to address this because this has crept in a couple of times. I've seen a few people who really support the team said they're not fit to wear the shirt. Well, they were terrible against Southampton. They were terrible, so the crowd sang that to the players because I think everyone's fed up with this at the end when you've lost. Patting your badge, no, go and play. We'll all play football. You run around, you give everything. Some weeks you win, some weeks you don't. The same crowd clapped 10,000 people at United, clapped Everton off the pitch when they'd been knocked out the FA Cup, right? In a performance, I watched them, think it was very good. Glory defeat, we had to go there. But the fans still clapped them off the pitch. Why didn't they clap them off the pitch at Goodison against Southampton? Because they didn't put the effort in. If Everton run around on Saturday and give everything, and Arsenal beat them 3-0, but the fans can see they give everything, they will clap them off the pitch. So I have to remove that one because that's nonsense when people say that. People did that day, wait till the final whistle, players went off, got the things out, didn't try and storm the box. I know there was no one there anyway, but they didn't try to cause any
storm the empty box.
They didn't run onto the pitch or whatever. They had the banners. It was a peaceful protest. They made the point, stayed, and they went. And that has to continue. I think you can have two things. I think you can back the team and the manager to the hilt, and you can protest because you want better Everton. And I think as long as it's done like we just said in that, because I think I used a boxing analogy the other day about it, is that it looks like, this is my perception, I might be way off it, this is just me, it looks like Evertonians have got the board on the ropes, and if they do it correctly, there will be change, and that correct is protest properly, don't splinter it and start doing mad things that ruin it that make most Evertonians who might be wobbling, ones who might be going, not sure, go, they're knobheads, I'm not joining that. Do keep your powder dry, do nice and peaceful, make your point, back the team. I think that way you get more and more and more and more support. I think if you do the other stuff, it becomes rebel rousing and people just don't want to associate that. Like you said, people don't want to see, I've seen loads, I hope Bill Kenwright dies, I hope this happens, this happens. Let's be a little bit, let's be better than that. Because ultimately, all Evertonians, all of us, whether you want to be part of a protest or you don't, we all want that to be better, that pit, because that's all that matters. Like you said it before perfectly, I don't really care about what's on the bleeding balance sheet, as long as what I care about is Kevin Thelwell can go, there's this boss striker here and we're buying him, and then we watch him and he scores, and he scores goals. That's all we want to see. I want my 12-year-old lad to go, Dad, can I have X on my shirt? Right now there's no, I want his own shirt because as far as I'm concerned, he's better than any of our players anyway. You want the team to have good players. We want to go the match and enjoy it, but we want a better Everton. I mean, is that? I know you're trying to jump back.
No, I was just going to ask Joe a question, if you don't mind. I was just going to say, in terms of the way in which Everton is perceived at the moment, because I know what the Echo's job's been over the last month or so, which has been great in terms of some of the stuff that you guys have done. But, there was an awful lot, wasn't in the national press after that Southampton game. I was watching Sky. I had food poisoning that day, thankfully, so I didn't go to the game. Well, thankfully, I didn't want to be there when I seen the result. But I seen Jeff Stelling saying that we were protesting and trying to stop the players on the coach.
Oh, yeah, I heard that.
And it's like, hang on.
You saw that.
Absolutely. I'm not even there. Yeah. And I know that's not the case. Yeah. But there is a difference, isn't there, Joe, between the national media coverage of Everton and this, and I had a little moan about this last time I was on, if you remember. It's like this thing of, Everton, let's have a kick at them.
Yeah.
And what you guys do at a local level. And I do wonder whether sometimes that perception gets to agents and potential players.
Yeah, of course it does, yeah.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it's certainly fashionable to have a kick at Everton at the moment. But obviously they're in a toxic spiral, and one thing I would say, in a toxic spiral, I don't think it was started by the fans by any stretch of the imagination. I think there is a disconnect between perhaps the national reporting from people aren't at the games and the national reporters who are at the game. There are a lot of very respectable journalists, for national titles, print and broadcast media, that have also been, that obviously cover the games, have also been quite open in their criticism and the scrutiny of the club. Obviously, Jeff Stelling isn't one of them. He's not someone that's coming down to Goodison every other week, and he's not somebody that's necessarily engaging with fans in the same way that I would do. Unfortunately, that was a lazy misconception that was repeated by far more than just them on that day. The idea that this coach welcome was of a protest rather than of support. And I do think it's very difficult. I mean, we probably all see this on social media. It's one of the big difficulties of the frustrated fan trying to express themselves, is that to people outside of this bubble that we're in, they look at it and they say, well, you're getting a new stadium. You spent £500 million on players. They're sitting there and think, well, why are you moaning? But nobody knows the club better than Evertonians, and I think it's very clear that there are fundamental issues there. How we address them, how we fix them is the big question.
Of course, yeah.
No, I think that's absolutely right. There has been some nonsense, and the problem is when what someone runs with a false narrative, everybody seems to run. We had the situation, without going too specific, but we had Ian Wright going with one thing and doing a video to apologise the next day. And that where I think this is different, Frank, is that the national press went with one thing, and then slowly but surely they turned, and it feels like now Everton have lost the trust of these now, and these are going after it. I've seen articles about the chairman I've never seen before, people kicking him. I've seen different things. And that's why I think this has gone too far now. And just to, as we sort of bring it to a close, for you, we'll go round, but how does Farhad Moshiri, if like Frank said, and no one can tell him what to do, he owns 90%, a billionaire, more fucking, there's more money probably in his wallet than I've ever seen and ever will see. But
doubt he has one.
He probably doesn't have it. He doesn't need it.
Doesn't need one.
How does he I don't even think repairs the right thing. How does he manage to, even from a perspective of keeping what Joe has said is absolutely correct? We are the biggest and the best thing about this football club. The fans, they are home and away, sell out, support the team up and down. We've had nothing. We've had not 28 years since we won a trophy. We've been in Europe about 3 or 4 times in that period, which is embarrassing. So how does Farhad Moshiri make this thing better?
Well, it's never too late to do the right thing. So that's the first thing. I think as a fan base we should hold him to, he'll do whatever it takes to get the fans on side.
That's what he said in that
and I think we've had a bit of jousting, and I think in reality, and I'll watch it back when I get home, I think the only thing if we are disagreeing, you and me, is not about if, it's when, right? So, and we've been saying on this for quite a long time, some of these things that are going to have to be done, it's when they happen, not if they happen. So if the owner, we're going to call him that, I prefer largest shareholder, but 94%, let's call him the owner, right? If the owner laid out your view strategy, which is 2 or 3 points, these are things that are definitely going to happen in a defined time scale. In other words, by time. That time has to be, and I think I've said it here before, between now and the start of next season, regardless of what division we're in. At that time, some of these people won't be here.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's what he has to do. And just because I want to have 2 things.
Go on.
I think the football club could send a strong message to its fan base if it announced tomorrow whether the directors are coming or not to the game on Saturday. Waiting till the build up to the game, like they did last time, I personally think would be totally and utterly unacceptable. Right? So that's me.
Okay, Joe, on to the same question to you there.
Frank's
going to get the last. Or should I go to Frank and leave Joe in the last call?
I think Frank wants last call.
He does. Go on, Joe. How look at it, would you think Farhad Moshiri could make this thing better? If we're going by what he said on the interview with Yazbal, which was, I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to get Everton back on set.
The easiest thing to remove or reduce some of the pressure at the moment is obviously on the pitch and getting wins. I think whether the timing was right, ultimately they've come to the right decision on the manager. I think Sean Dyche is the best person to put Everton in the best position to get the points that they need to try and stay up. Whether he will or not, I don't know, but I think he's the best person. I think that's a decision that, for all the decisions that they have got wrong, I think that's a decision that they've got right. But I do think that the situation is too extreme now. I think it's gone too far for wins and points on the pitch to cover up the wider issues. If Everton stay up, hopefully they will. We all hope. We're all desperate that they will.
Absolutely.
Even then, I don't think it's enough to then get to the summer and go, "Oh, survived, brilliant." We won't make any changes or anything. In the short term, I think communication is the most important, and I think there's a missed opportunity, perhaps in the last few days, in the fact that I can understand why some people at the club might have felt it would be a good idea for Sean Dyche to be the first person to answer for the transfer window, because he's a confident, he's an assertive speaker, he knows the terrain well. He's obviously, that noise around the club hasn't prevented him from coming into the club. As we've all seen today, he dealt with those questions quite well. Obviously it's easier for him to deal with those questions because he doesn't bear responsibility for that. He's not accountable for, at the very most he's accountable for the last 36 hours of a transfer window that lasted 31 days. I think it's a real shame, and I still think there would be value in somebody from the football side or from elsewhere within the football club, whoever it is, to come out and just explain what did happen, why that happened. Personally, obviously, a lot of attention now is on the director of football, Kevin Farwell. When I look at some of the things he's doing behind the scenes that you would, even at their very best, will have impact in the long term. And when I speak to the people that I speak to involved in football that aren't involved in the club, he's very well respected. He's held in high regard by a lot of people, to the point where I find it very difficult to believe that Everton have endured the transfer window they've endured because of him. I think that he's probably been affected by issues outside of his control. Now, obviously, I don't expect someone from Everton to come out and say, this is what the bank balance is, this is what the issues are, this is what the Premier League is saying about profit and sustainability and things like that. But I do think it would help to treat the fans with a little bit of maturity and just say, look, we know we haven't got things quite right. This is a little bit of a window into perhaps why things have gone the way they have, and this is how we're going to address them. At the end of the day, whatever anybody wants, whichever side of the battle you're on in relation to changing the board, changing the owner, everybody wants the best for this football club, and the best for this football club, whatever your perspective is, that it stays in the Premier League this season. The point that you make about investment is obviously crucial. No one serious is going to invest in Everton whilst Premier League fate hangs in the balance. So even if you're in the camp where you think that people from the outside need to come in to improve the club, well, Everton will be in a better position for that to happen, and for that to happen with the right people coming in, if they stay in the Premier League and they're in that summer. Things like some of the changes, we need to focus on what can happen to make an immediate impact now, what can make Everton stronger for the next 4 months on the pitch. And the best thing that the club can do is help try and repair relations with the fans. Can they do that? I don't know. We are in a very difficult position, but I think showing a willingness to try and to treat the fans with a bit of maturity and to offer a little bit of accountability and an explanation for what happened, I think that'd be a really good start.
Absolutely. Go on then, big man. Wrap it up.
Difficult for me to disagree with anything Joe said, in a sense. I think 5 wins changes it all. And it does, doesn't it? Because as I say, all of us as fans, we can talk about what's going on outside that football stadium, but actually, if the players go out and turn Arsenal over, they get a point at Anfield, they go and win the next 3, Villa, Leeds, whoever. This is going to be a very different conversation. People are going to be a bit more patient in terms of the approach they take with the own. Well, I think they will, but equally, whether they are or they're not, I think that transparency and openness are the 2 things that we'd all urge the board to actually embrace now.
Absolutely.
I think the transfer window, whichever way you look at it, was a disaster for the club, and therefore an explanation is required. And that could be the lad who ended up at Spurs was a snake. It could be we had 3 players inside hotels
booked,
waiting for them to sign, and their agent got on the phone, got a better deal from Wolves, Southampton. The offer we made wasn't good enough because they wanted astronomical wages. And Kevin says, we're not doing that anymore because we've had our thing. Whatever the explanation is, give us an explanation.
All of the above, probably.
And it needs to be from a footballing person within the club. That's my opinion of this. So I think honesty, transparency, Give the football people within the club the tools with which to communicate. And that does come from leadership from the top, and it does come from Mr. Mashiri, I'm afraid. And he needs to be saying, be free to go out and do the right thing in terms of explaining to our fan base what's happened here, because it was an absolute shit show. I think for the fans, what I would say, because I know I always get this, I said this, people come up to me, oh, well, you just, you weren't, the club are members of downtown, and well, yeah, they are, so are Liverpool, so are Aston Villa, so are Birmingham, so are City, so are United, right? They pay us $3,500 a year. Honestly, that does not shut me up.
That's right, yeah.
Right? So this is not me saying, I think Everton's board is fantastic. Let's all cheer them on. I am saying be careful what you wish for. And what I'm saying to the fans is, let's be a little cooler in terms of our approach and a little bit better with tactics. The strategy of, we need a new owner, I can buy into that. What are the tactics to help us get there? And as John's explained, this isn't something where you get someone come in tomorrow and say, yeah, I'll give you $1 billion. And we're Newcastle. Remember what Newcastle went through, guys. I don't want to go through that. I don't want a Mike Ashley coming in, that sort of character, and saying, well, as you said before, bit of a fire, saying, let's get relegated. Let's see what we can do. Get a few academy players in. Let's see if this Sims lad can score 20 in the Championship for us and get us up. Let's roll it out. I don't want that. So if it takes a bit of time, if hopefully we can stay up this season, doesn't stop us from saying we need additional. And again, more realistically and pragmatically, I'd say it's making the case for more people on the board. That's what I would say.
That's what we've been saying for ages.
Rather than get rid of the board. Whether you think that's right or not, I do not think it's going to happen. So let's try and persuade the club in a constructive fashion. We need to have an open and honest conversation. This lad is the starting point for me, because the only people who read the Echo read it for the footy. Sorry. So he's your starting point, and start reaching out to guys like you who've got that direct communication with the fan base. And again, with due respect to the fan advisory board, and they will be as committed to our football club as we all are, but they are not seen as authentic to a lot of the fan base, rightly or wrongly. And I don't know the guys.
No, you're right.
So I'm not criticising them, but if Mashiri would have come in here, that would have got even far more respect, right? Doing an interview with him. That'd be far more. That'd be far better. Well, as I say,
you suggest
not
that we should
necessarily
do
the
that,
owner. Honestly, and whoever out there, there's lots of but open yourselves up, be transparent, because at the moment, it smells, and I don't think it has to.
Do you know the big thing? Sorry, mate. The big. It's just a bookend for what you just said. Trust us. The football club needs to trust the wider us.
There you go. We could go on all night. Let's be honest.
Can we do this again?
We'll do it again, yeah, definitely. Big thanks to Frank, Joe, John, as always. Let us know what you think in the comment section. Has it gone too far? Can it be repaired? The trust? What does Mashiri have to do? And why didn't we get a number 9 or another forward? That's the big one. Big thanks for watching. See you later.